Alright, in today's video, I'm going to go over what I like to call low mileage brake maintenance. This is about increasing your brake pad life. This is applicable to vehicles that are not driven a lot, so low mileage, vehicles that are only driven seasonally, especially vehicles that are driven in environments with a lot of salt and corrosion, and also electrical vehicles due to the fact they don't use their brakes as much because they rely on the electric motors to help slow down and regenerate power, giving the potential to have much longer brake pad life. But if things go wrong, well, they can end up with short pad life as well. So this is all about trying to get as much out of your pads as you can. Now, you have basically two different types of brake calipers. The vast majority of vehicles, which is what this vehicle has, and where the problem happens, is the floating brake caliper, called the floating brake caliper because, well, the caliper can move. It's on pins. It can go back and forth. It is not in a fixed position. Versus your fixed calipers, which tend to be on your performance vehicles, the caliper is fixed. It does not move around. So on your floating brake pad caliper, you have a brake piston. That piston comes out and it presses in the inborn pad, the pad that faces the inside of the vehicle, presses against that. And as it presses against that pad, that caliper then pushes itself back, pulls itself back. It's squeezing, and it squeezes in the inborn pad. And when you release, it comes back off. So basically, you comes out, squeezes your inborn pad, and then the caliper comes back and squeezes the outboard pad. And then once you let off the brakes, this releases the outboard pad that's not being squeezed anymore, and the caliper piston retracts a little bit and it no longer squeezes the inborn pad. Now, what happens is if your caliper pins end up sticking, well, it can end up in kind of like a seize position. So it'll squeeze this pad on the outside, but it doesn't fully release, and it ends up constantly dragging against the rotor. So there are brake pad wear charts, and the most common cause for this outer pad to wear out unevenly versus the inside pad is the fact that the caliper guide pins are seized up. It can also affect the inborn, but typically when the inside pad wears out unevenly, it's more likely because the caliper piston itself is not fully retracting as constant, it's giving a little bit of constant pressure against that. So different vehicles do mount their caliper pins a little bit differently, meaning how they're bolted in, basically. So this isn't going to be vehicle specific because this is about just maintenance. But basically, you would remove your caliper pin, and you notice this does have a little bit of grease on it. This particular vehicle has 5 years old. It's 5 years old, about 17,000 miles. It is not driven in an environment with salt. And this actually looks pretty good, which is good because this vehicle is known to have some issues with the caliper piston seizing. The caliper guide pins seizing due to a lack of lubrication from the factory, and then you end up with uneven pad wear. So what we're going to do, due to how clean this is, it's not pitted, it's not rusted, it's not crusty. If it was crusty, I would use some brake cleaner. It gets like this dry, just like gunked up grease. You typically don't see that as much anymore as lubrications have improved over the years. So with this one, I'm just going to wipe it with a towel because it's just grease. I'm just wiping off the old grease, and it looks pretty good. Now I'm going to lubricate it with brake lubricant. Do not use like general purpose grease or wheel bearing lubricant. Use a brake specific lubricant. If you have a favorite one, use your favorite one. If you don't, just go to the auto parts store, get yourself some brake lubricant, or order some online. There's a bunch of different types. Just buy whatever you want. This is one I picked off the shelf, the CRC ceramic fortified brake system grease. I know one I see online that's really popular is one that comes in a bottle with a brush, and it's purple. This one in particular is white. So I'm just going to put it on there pretty heavy, and I'm just going to really get it all over that guy. I really want to get it on there pretty good. That's all there is to it. Now sometimes this rubber is important. Sometimes that rubber will stay in the caliper itself, or sometimes it pulls out with the pin. It doesn't really matter. Just make sure that rubber at the end of the day ends up both on your caliper and on the pin. So we're going to put that in there. Like I said, I want to make sure this rubber goes over that little hump like that. Now sometimes, like I said, it will stay on there and you'll just pull out your pin, and you just got to make sure you get it back on your pin. So just like that. Now it's got extra lubricant on it. It wants to slide off. Now it's on there. I see how well I can just press that in. You actually may be able to actually hear that little grease squishing in there, and it rotates nicely. That's what's happening. That caliper slides, but it allows it to move. And if this is seized up, it won't really, it may not do that at all. I've seen them so seized up where you can't move them. But that's nice. That's what you want. That's the end result. How often should you do this? It really depends on your environment and the vehicle. This is the first time I've done this on this car. 5 years, 17,000 miles. They look pretty decent. Based on my pads, I'm looking at my pads. I probably have at least under 17,000 miles in these pads. I won't touch these caliper pins again until I do a brake job. Now, if you pull them out on the vehicle and they look terrible after 4 years, grimy, crusty, dried up, maybe you need to start checking them every 2 years, or it could have just been the grease they used from the factory was really poor. If you live in an environment, it's salty, and you're having to drive it in the winter time, and you snow and all that good stuff, even maybe every 2 years, because that can really wreck it. I believe, actually, could be wrong about this, but I believe that Tesla, so we're talking about electric car, it's actually in their scheduled maintenance. Yes, electric cars have maintenance, guys. That to do grease the caliper slide pins every 2 years in corrosive environments. And this is the reason why, because a caliper can lock up. So anyway, I hope this helps somebody. I was just trying to do a quick video on doing some preventive maintenance to prolong the life of your brake pads. Grease those things. Anytime you do a brake job, clean those, grease those. Very important. If your rubber is torn, replace it. If your caliper pins are really, really bad and you're doing a brake job and your rubber's torn, you can a lot of times order a kit that will come with a new caliper pin as well as the rubber. So, till next time, I hope y'all guys have a great day.